Hi, and welcome to the Leader's Edge, how to sharpen your competitive advantage and make a positive impact as a leader in your organization and community. I'm Emily Chiwa, and with me is Georgia Donaldson. We are
Hi.
leadership coaches. We are leadership coaches and hosts of the show. And today we have with us Jeremy Francis. He is, hi Jeremy. He is an organizational development specialist and a founding director of the Neurodiversity Foundation based in Trinidad and Tobago. And before we dive in, if you are joining us live today or on the replay, we'd like you to just leave a comment, say hello, say where you're from, for us, so we know that you'd seen us, and maybe even if you have a question for Jeremy, he'd probably be looking at the comments afterwards. Yeah. So DEI, when we think of diversity, equity, inclusion, I guess neurodiversity falls right smack into it, right, Jeremy and Georgia? Yeah.
Yes,
Definitely.
yes.
Yeah, and these are topics these days that it's very I guess uh in vogue, if you want to call it that. But more than in vogue, I mean, I think it's important. It's important for us to have spaces where people can feel included, where all people can have an opportunity to succeed. And in order to do that, we have to understand a lot. We have to become a lot more aware of our own biases, right? And then we create where we can policies and environments that are inclusive and allow people to flourish. So Georgia and neurodiversity is this odd topic. I found this definition, well, a kind of definition, this Cleveland Clinic organization. So neurodiversity is a word used to explain the unique ways people's brains work. While everyone's brain develops similarly, no two brains function just alike. But neurodivergent means having a brain that works differently from the average or neurotypical person. So Jeremy, let me know if that definition does any justice to this topic. Anyhow, we're gonna bring Jeremy on in now, I guess,
Mhm.
and have him, share a little bit about his story, how he ended up founding this foundation, and what need he saw to learn more about this idea of neurodiversity at work and how it impacts work. Yeah.
Sure. So, morning, everyone. So, yes, that definition more or less covers it. So, neurodiversity really is a recognition that no two people think alike and that we're all different in terms of how we view the world and how we interact with it. But more specifically, it looks at conditions or issues such as autism, ADHD, dyslexia, which are particular conditions with certain characteristics. And what we're saying is that people who have those conditions, and even using the word conditions is a bit contentious, but I use it for the time being, we're saying that that is normal, not abnormal, because that's part of the issue, right? We think that people who are autistic or ADHD are different or have a disorder in some way. And in fact, the word disorder is in the title of some of them. So ADHD, the D is disorder, right? So what we're saying
Mm.
is it's not a disorder, it's just a difference. And it's normal that there are different types of people in the world, right? And we need to be able to be cognizant of that and build a world that recognizes the difference and not see it as a disorder. Yeah, so that's the main thing.
Okay,
Awesome.
Jeremy, that's an interesting spin on it. Have you ever heard it put that way, Emily? Just a difference. It's not a disorder. And maybe
Yeah.
we need to start looking at now the definition and the terms we're using for some of these quote unquote disorders. It was interesting this morning when the three of us were speaking before we came live that we are neurodivergent ourselves because we were talking about directions, the difficulty some of us here who shall not be named with understanding what's left and what's right and having to know directions and so on. So it is really interesting that sitting in one space, three of us have those challenges.
Mhm.
But Jeremy, neurodiversity, it sounds so posh, really and truly. Is it now just something that's popular and a fad? Talk to us about that.
Yes, yes and no. So on the one hand, and because I'm also in the consultant space, we would all recognize that there are fads when it comes to our work, right? So I remember some years ago, leadership was the big thing. Everywhere you went, there was leadership conference, there was leadership training, then there was strategy. There's always something. Coming out of the pandemic, though, and even leading into it, the whole issue of employee wellness became a thing. People working from home and so on. And then coming into that was the issue of neurodiversity as well. So part of it is that awareness that as humans, fads happen, and people tend to coalesce around it. The issue here, though, is that neurodiversity is a significant challenge for a lot of people in the workplace, in schools, and so on. So whenever the fad comes around, I guess people in the space take that opportunity to spread the word and to make it more known and to try and get as many things done as possible before the fad moves on. Right? So for some of us, it's not a fad. For some of us, for a lot of people, it is their daily life, and it has
Yes.
a real impact on their ability to work, to manage their families, and so on. So while the spotlight is on us, we will take the opportunity to make sure that we speak as loudly as we can, as clearly as we can, to get more allies on our side, so that it, it stays as long as it can in the
Oh,
public spotlight.
okay, wonderful. Today starts Neurodiversity Week, and
Mhm.
Emily and I are so pleased that you chose to start your week with us. So, talk to
Yes.
us about Neurodiversity Week and the work of the foundation.
Right. So just to backtrack a little bit and to give you an idea of the foundation itself. So the foundation is actually in its infancy stage. We're still a baby. We launched in October 2023 in Queens Hall in Port of Spain. We had a nice opening, a nice launch, but the actual conversation started way back in 2016. So again, as a consultant, I had the opportunity to travel to the UK for a conference. And when I do that, I tend to visit friends. So one of my very dear friends, Stacey John Lazier, who's a doctor working with the NHS in England, she actually is a neurodevelopmental pediatrician. So her day-to-day job is dealing with kids with autism, ADHD, dyslexia, and helping them and their families to navigate their lives, school system, and so on. And over dinner one evening, Stacy and I were having a conversation. She was asking about, how could she, using her knowledge, contribute back home. So that conversation eventually led us to forming the foundation. And even before that, Stacy had come to Trinidad twice to work with the Autistic Society in Trinidad and Tobago. Again, just as a way of leveraging her experience in the UK to help develop at home. And the really important point here is that sometimes we don't have to wait for others to figure things out or to create the space. You can do it yourself. If there's a passion project you have or something that you realize is an issue, you don't have to look for somebody else to set something up. And that's exactly what we did. Now, from the time that that became an issue, you realize that all of a sudden you start noticing things you didn't notice before. So I always give the example of myself. So I would classify myself as a highly sensitive person. That's an actual clinical term. What that means is I am very sensitive to light, smells, and sound, right? A particular problem to me, which is a bit odd, I guess people may think, is the color red. The color red affects me quite negatively if I'm in a space where there's a lot of red. Loud noises also puts me on edge. And those are things that I only became aware of as I started delving into this world. And those are just basic things. There are other people that have a lot more significant challenges. And when you wrap this into the world of work, you can see how we can have exponential issues around this issue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But Emily, you know what I'm thinking? That HR people, I'm hoping that we have some HR people online because this is so important for us when we're talking about ergonomics and setting up workspace for people and how color can impact people, how sound can impact people at work, and even smells. Jeremy, you told us a story about someone, was it you who was sitting close to the kitchen and the
Mhm.
impact that the smells had on that person's productivity?
Yeah, so things like that happen quite often. And the thing is, sometimes the person that's experiencing it isn't even aware that those things are affecting them. It almost
Mm.
becomes part of the background. And sometimes it's only when they move to a different part of the office they recognize the difference. So part of the challenge with neurodiversity locally is a lack of awareness, not only from the employer standpoint, but even from us as individuals, on the things in our environment that can impact our performance. And we need to kind of take stock of that and start paying attention to the things in our environment. So
Yeah.
I've been working from home for the past 15 years. So even before it was a fad, I was really into it, right? And one of the great challenges I had was when COVID hit. So when COVID hit, my wife and kids joined me at home. And for the first 6 to 9 months, I was a complete disaster. I was accustomed to being home alone in the quiet. All of a sudden, there were a number of other people in the space, and I was literally going crazy. And it was at times like that I started understanding it was not I didn't love my family. It was I had become accustomed to a certain level of quiet, and that was upended by the amount of activities going around me. And a
Mhm.
simple thing that helped me was investing in a pair of noise cancelling headphones. Made a
Mhm.
big difference. So
Right.
things like that can help once we become aware. It isn't always about spending a lot of money or creating a whole different office style. It's about recognizing the things in the work environment that might be problematic for some people. It might be problematic for a lot, but again, if you don't have the conversation, you'll never know. And making some slight adjustments that can help.
Okay.
Yeah. So Jeremy, I'm hearing you speak, and I mean, a couple of things popped into my mind. One is that um, we maybe we tend maybe to be sensitive to these issues more in younger people than in older people
Ah.
because parents looking at their kids develop and wanting the best for them, of course, would notice, diagnose, and think about these things when you're younger. And I don't know, and we could be making an assumption here, but the assumption a lot of times might be by the time you get to adult age and you're in the workplace, even if you may have been died or you have a condition that you've always lived with, you would have learned to live with it by
Mhm.
then. So your coping mechanisms and different things are already sort of in place. So that's like one side of the equation. If the individual in question, the person who's impacted, understands
Mhm.
um, their sensitivity or their condition, right? Um, uh, as you said, I mean, there's another layer where people may not even understand that you have a sensitivity. Like you may not have been aware that that sensitivity to noise um, was so important to you until you had the challenge that you
Yes.
just described, right? So I think the responsibility is twofold, right? Partly on the individual themselves as to starting to be more aware of themselves in terms of what's happening with me. Am I impacted differently in different situations? So trying to clarify that in case, when you feel like you're not doing as well or something is impacting you, or, trying to
Mm.
dig under or dive under a little bit to get that understanding. I mean, does the foundation help people individually to understand their particular situations and sensitivities so that they may be able to help? I mean, one is to help yourself a little bit, and then, of course, the organization being sensitive too. But you have
Mhm.
to kind of know what to ask for, right? So I'm
Right.
curious. Yeah.
So the first issue is what the official term is called masking. So this is when an individual um, tries to be normal or try to fit in by,
Mhm.
you know, closing down some of their neurodiverse traits in order to not stand out and to seem
Mhm.
fun. So some autistic people, as an example, they have these repetitive movements or repetitive things that they will do. So they may play with a pen, or they might always have a pen in their hand, or they may always be doing this with their hands. And
Mhm.
because they know that looks weird to others, they would try to not do it in front of them to sort of fit in. Problem with that though is that it causes or it uses up a lot of mental space and it makes you very tired. And
Mhm.
again, the link with neurodiversity and mental health is a strong one. So you would find that because of the energy, mental energy that is put in place for masking, you find that some neurodivergent people suffer from anxiety, depression, and so on, because during their working hours and their working day, they have to pretend to be someone else in
Mhm.
order to not be seen as weird, right? So that's a really important thing that, again, employers need to pay attention to, especially when people may make comments about people and say things about them in a flippant way in the office, not recognizing that there's a real issue that this person may be having and that we're not being sensitive to their needs in that way. In
Mhm.
terms of foundation, we do not operate at that granular level of helping individuals. Our main focus is to look at research in Trinidad and Tobago and the Caribbean, where we make people aware and we do research to make it more known what neurodiversity is and the impact it's having. Our other role is to communicate as effectively as we can to make neurodiversity known so that people can, on their own, say, hey, this sounds like me, or this sounds like my brother, or this sounds like my cousin, which will then lead them to start doing some research. And I mean, there's lots of information out there. So that the same way it was for me, as soon as I started understanding the term, I became interested, and then I started, finding out things. We are also partnering with other foundations like the Autism Society, there's a Dyslexia Association, and so on locally, who specialize in those areas. So we don't intend to be specialists ourselves in those particular areas, but we will partner with them to make sure that people can find the resources that they need in that respect.
Ah,
Awesome.
oh,
That's
boy, Jeremy. Yeah, this is fantastic.
mm-hmm.
As an HR professional, my wheels are turning. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
thinking, how many times have we said about our colleague or coworker, whoever it is, that he or she is slow without thinking? Is there something behind her being slow? He's lazy. Is there something else behind it? Of course, there are some people who just don't want to work, but there are
Yeah.
others who have challenges or just are different. And
Hmm.
so it says to me, as HR professionals, we need to do some more work in this area. Tell us about some of the things that you have lined up this week, Jeremy.
Yes.
Right. So, Neurodiversity Week, first thing is talking to you lovely ladies about neurodiversity. So, that's the first thing. But this week we have three very important webinars, seminars online. The first one deals with neurodiversity in education. So we have a panel of experts, both local and international, meeting with stakeholders in education. So this will be parents, teachers, anybody involved in education, talking about the impact of neurodiversity, specifically on adolescents, and things that could be done in the classroom or around the classroom to help children deal with any of these conditions that we talked about. So that is Wednesday at 12 to 1. I can always post a link to that one after. The
Yes,
second
please.
one having is on Thursday, and this is dealing with neurodiversity and mental health. So again, I would have mentioned that there's usually a relationship between both of them, and they are also not the same. So, as an example, bipolar disorder is not a neurodivergent issue or condition. However, some neurodiverse persons do have bipolar disorder, right? So we need to be able to make those distinctions and understand the difference, but also the links between them. Because I would have also mentioned, because of issues like masking, you will find that some neurodivergent people will also present with some mental health challenges. Yeah. And then
Okay.
Friday, it's a big one. It's a big one for me. Um, it's neurodiversity at work, and I have been able to get in contact with a real expert in neurodiversity at work. He actually did his PhD in this topic. Um,
Wow.
so we're having a discussion on Friday. That's Dr. Ian Isaacson out of the UK. We're going to have a more in-depth conversation about his research, how neurodiversity at work presents, and what are some of the things that organizations need to start doing in order to more integrate or to be more inclusive of neurodiverse individuals that make up their staff. Right? So those are three things. Over the weekend, we still have to confirm we're gonna go onto the radio with at least two neurodivergent individuals, where they will have an opportunity to talk about what it's like for them
Excellent.
at work, at school, and that kind of thing. As we have more details, we'll post that. And we have a couple other things. So I have been invited to a couple organizations to come and talk to the HR team. And over the next few weeks and months, that is something I'm going to devote some of my time to. So if there's anyone working in an organization and you want to have a conversation at work, you can get in contact with me and I can make arrangements to come in and have a conversation with your staff. Those are not problems at all because, like I said, one of the main things we want to do in the beginning for sure is raise awareness, and that is one of the best ways to do that.
Okay, excellent, excellent.
Uh,
Emily,
yeah, I was asking. I was
we
gonna
could talk for
go
another
on.
hour, right, Emily?
We can. But so are all these online events like stuff that
Yeah.
people can do remotely? Just
Yes,
connect, go to the link and register and so on.
correct. So everything is on Zoom, and I can provide those links for the call so that people
Yeah, so
can.
we'll add it to the comments on this
Yep.
feed, and Jeremy is linked in our event as well. So on your LinkedIn page, Jeremy, I imagine everything will also be there.
That is
Jeremy
correct.
Francis, everybody.
Yep.
So you all could look him up for sure. And I think one of the things you had said earlier when we first spoke, Jeremy, and I know we have to wrap up, Georgia. We way over 15 minutes.
Yes, but it's worth
This is
it.
so
It's worth it.
interesting. Yeah. Um, I suppose a key thing, I mean, and why we're bringing all this awareness is that, and I think Georgia, you had hit that nail on the head as well, is that sometimes when there are performance issues with persons and they don't seem quote unquote normal, because what is really normal, So this is something that I think would challenge us all. I mean, HR, yes, but all of us, right? Because we work as a team, sitting with people, and how aware or willing are we as individuals? So this is the A piece in our action. How aware are you of the differences of others? How do you look at other people when they are different from you? And let's challenge ourselves to be a little more open, a little more curious, a
Yes,
little more allowing, so that we can understand and recognize that sometimes persons are struggling, and let's be a good neighbor, quote unquote. Let's be a good teammate. Let's try to make the place or the spaces inclusive for all, so that we can all flourish. And I always say that when we do, we would all be better off for it.
sure,
Yeah, so that
for
is
sure.
that is what the action that we want to take, and we want to invite you everyone to
Yes,
get involved, learn about neurodiversity, not just for your kids, your teens, but also for yourselves, your workmates, your colleagues. And, let's see how we can, improve this in Trinidad and Tobago and allow people to be themselves. We don't have
yes,
to be masking.
that's so true. That's so true.
I
And
couldn't say that to myself, Emily.
yeah, and let's say to those who are listening to us, if you are driving, we hope that we've been good company this morning. If you're at the office already, we hope that you've said to your boss that this is part of your professional development. And for those of you who will catch us on the replay, you don't want to miss this. Gather around, maybe get your team together and have this conversation together with a cup of tea and what, some scones is good conversation. Thank you so much, Jeremy. I think we've had, I think he's the one who's stayed with us the longest.
Yes,
Good to know.
Yes,
Good to know.
but
yes,
for good cause, but for good cause, Jeremy. And we wish you all the best with all of your activities this week.
yes.
Thank you so much. And anyone who needs to get in contact with us, you can send an email to foundation.neurodiversity@gmail.com and we will do our best to get back to you.
Foundation.neuro.
Diversity@gmail.com.
Okay, wonderful. So
Right.
thank you. So we see you all again next week, Monday. And for those of you who are on the replay, you can catch it at any time. Have a wonderful week, everyone.
Yes.
All right. Take care, everyone.
Take
Bye
care.
now. Thank
Bye
you.
Bye.
bye.